statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out that it's Bitcoin.
Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome, traders. Welcome, followers. Welcome, supporters. Welcome, haters. Welcome to all of you. It's been a tiny bit of time since the last time I've done a Spaces with you. So I must admit that I missed you a little bit, despite the fact that almost no one listens to my Spaces. These Spaces are largely done for the benefit of myself. I like to listen to my own Spaces after I do them, just as a sort of a form of self-entertainment. No, I'm only teasing, guys. Listen, very few people do listen to these Spaces, but I'm still going to continue them for the benefit of those who might, in the future, come back to this electronic footprint and find some value. But I do want to extend a thank you to all of those who, or the very few of you who do step up to the plate and join me on these. I've never been one that's been overly obsessed with numbers. To be very honest with you, if there's one or even two of you who grabs a kernel of value from anything that I have to say or write, it's worth it as far as I'm concerned. So, let's talk a little bit today. Let's talk Bitcoin. Of course, that's what we do here. And before I delve into the topic today, which I think is very fascinating, by the way, I do want to mention, as I always do before each talk, is that I don't hand the mic in my spaces to other people to express their views or what have you, but I do welcome that you express your views in written form. So I will be monitoring your questions or any remarks that you have throughout the talk and even after. So please feel free to do that. One of the reasons I don't do that is because I find it more productive if I kick off the spaces with somewhat of a monologue and you respond. I also feel it's not very productive if a lot of people like to come on these spaces while they're mowing their lawn or their baby's crying in the background. They're out on a tractor in their backyard farm, tilling the ground. And I just find that all of that's annoying to me. So we do it this way. And maybe that's why no one shows up to my spaces, but that's okay. It's my choice. It's my world here. And we'll do it this way. So listen, I wanted to share with my Twitter, my X audience here, something that I've been speaking about with the Bitcoiners that follow me very closely. I want to share this little aspect of some of the things that we've been focused on. And it is largely focused on the two most important periods to be aware of moving forward. Because Bitcoin is cyclical in nature, there are certain periods during each cycle that have, in my opinion, greater importance than other periods, okay? And so let's focus on the two upcoming periods that I believe every one of you should be aware of. Now, before I do that, let me generally say or remind everyone that Bitcoin, we are used to having birthdays every year of our lives. Bitcoin's birthdays operate on leap years. So Bitcoin has a birthday called its halving or halvening, whichever term you prefer. Bitcoin's birthday happens every 4 years, and its upcoming birthday is estimated to occur in late April of 2024. That's its next halving or halvening, right? So keep that in mind, that one full year or one full birthday for Bitcoin is every 4 years. Another way of saying this is that one full cycle for Bitcoin is 4 years. And as I mentioned, there are certain periods throughout that 4-year cycle that are more important, as far as I'm concerned, than other periods. Okay. And what I posted in my announcement for this, what I posted for my announcement in this live session here, I'm just wondering if I might be able to share that with you. Let's see. Give me a second here. Give me just a moment here, guys. I might be able to do this. Might be able to do this time. I will post it here. I do have it posted in the announcement for this live spaces, but it's a graphical representation that I believe is based on the Rational Roots work, someone I greatly respect. And this, while this graphic is not directly from him, it is based on his work. I've just posted it here and attached it to this live session. And I want you to take a very careful look at this Bitcoin spiral clock, if you will. At the very top of this circular image is the number 12. So it's depicted in the form of a regular clock. So we've got 12 o'clock, we've got 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so forth and so on, right? At the top of the clock is where the halving occurs. Now, every complete cycle is a 4-year period. So from 12 o'clock to 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way back to 12 again, would represent one full cycle, one birthday of Bitcoin, representing a 4-year period. Okay. Now, if you take a look at the 930 mark, you'll see that this is a few months behind. We're actually approaching the 10 o'clock period before 12, and we might be a bit past the 10 o'clock period at this particular time. I do know that this image is a few months or so dated. It's dated a few months or so ago. But of course, when that circle reaches 12 o'clock will be approximately in the latter part of April of 2024. Now, I want you to be aware that there are periods along this 4-year cycle that are far more important than other periods. And I'm going to quickly point out the periods. The halving is important. That's, of course, at 12 o'clock. 1:30, the 1:30 mark in the clock is extraordinarily important. That typically takes place anywhere between 6 and 8 months after the halving. That's extraordinarily important. Okay. The 4:30 mark in the halving, in the 4-year cycle, that is extraordinarily important. Okay. 4:30. So 12 o'clock is important. 1:30 is important. Okay. 4:30 is important. Then you have, I would say, 7:30 is very important. And then we repeat the cycle again. Now, those are sort of like the macro periods. And I do want to come back to that. What I want to focus on with you now at this particular moment is a shorter term time period that is the next period that we need to place a greater degree of importance on. And so what I've just posted, I think I did this right. What I have just posted is a calendar of Bitcoin's performance broken down by month, okay, that calendar shows the average returns of each month over the lifespan or over Bitcoin's entire life here, right? And so if you take even a cursory look at this calendar, what you'll see is that August and September, that 2-month period, is statistically the worst performance, the worst period in terms of performance for Bitcoin throughout the entire year. So August and September, that's the nastiest period statistically each year for Bitcoin's performance. Now, if you look a little past that into October, November, and into a part of December, so October, November into December, this represents the start of a very powerful or very bullish cyclical period for Bitcoin. Now, it is not by chance that a very positive period follows a very negative period. This should make sense to you. All right. Down, down for 2 months would create an overly done downward movement in a financial market, which is typically followed by a rebound that produces a statistically higher probability for green being produced in the following months. This is not only the case for Bitcoin, it's the case for the equity market as well. August and September are statistically the worst 2-month period for the equity markets. And as you move into the middle of October, into November and December, that represents one of the most bullish periods for the equity market. So same thesis here, same statistical play out here in Bitcoin as well. So the period, the first upcoming period that we all should be aware of is October, November, and into December. That statistically, virtually, not every single year, nothing can be 100%. So let's not get ridiculous. There are exceptions. There are outliers to this statistical fact, but statistically, we're in for, if history's any guide, we're in for a very strong period moving into October, November, and December. And so when people tell me that we should be on the lookout for a move back to the Bitcoin lows or a break of the new lows, and I look at this, I just mark that up as ridiculous talk. That statistically speaking, we're basically through any period that could have had the ability to cause Bitcoin to basically sell off dramatically. But we're already at the tail end of that period and are moving into the next statistically bullish period for Bitcoin. So the bias in your view should not be to the downside. The bias in your view, if you're to have one, should definitely be to the upside. There's no question about it. And a lot of people say, well, Oliver, this time can be different. And I actually just don't want you to fall prey to this notion that gets floated around all the time that this time can be different. And while it is true to a certain extent, or it is true theoretically, but we can't base things on fanciful ideas that have never happened before. So what I'm saying is that all we have is history to rely on. Anything that is outside of what's happened, anything that is outside of the statistical norm that we have, is nothing more than fanciful ideas. It's nothing more than a guess. It's nothing more than a gamble because we have nothing to base it on but theory and conjecture. So what I'm always telling my traders to do is to largely rely on history. It's the only reliable thing we have. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Nothing's perfect. But it is the only thing that we have. Otherwise, it's just an imagined idea in the mind. And I'm not going to bet my family's resources on an imagined idea. That's just not what I do. And that's not how you win in anything long term. All right. You bet with history, and your odds of being right statistically over time, betting on what has occurred repetitively before, that's how you win consistently over time. And when you look at October, November into December, you see primarily 3 months back to back after 3 months of green back to back after 2 months of red. Now, I find it quite interesting that despite the fact that we've had the most hawkish Fed in the history of the Federal Reserve, despite the fact that we've had the the fastest interest rate hiking period in the history of the Federal Reserve, despite the fact that we've had one of the most fraud-based end the fraud-based periods in the cryptocurrency industry since its inception, despite the fact that we've had a record number of companies blow up, go under, despite the fact that we have regulators such as the SEC focused in almost a constant negative way on the industry. Despite all of these things, Bitcoin has experienced the most shallow bear market in its entire industry. And I remember when the Fed started raising interest rates, all the bears, everyone came out of the woodworks. All the naysayers came out of the woodworks. You know what they were saying? Well, Bitcoin has never gone through a period of a tightened monetary policy. Bitcoin has never gone through a period of rising interest rates. Bitcoin has never gone through a period where the Fed is hawkish. Bitcoin has never gone through a recession. Bitcoin has never gone through the blah, 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 bull, 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 bull. At the end of the day, despite all of that, Bitcoin had the shallowest, despite the FTXs of the world, despite the scam bankrupt frauds of the world, despite the Celsiuses, despite the Three Arrows Capitals of the world, despite the BlockFis of the world, despite the Lunas of the world, despite the USTs of the world, despite the hacks in the industry, despite the attack on the exchanges, despite the SEC, despite everything, Bitcoin doesn't have a worse period. It has a less worse period. It has the most shallow bear market in its entire history. In addition to that, it is now putting in one of the shallowest Septembers of its life. Now, I know we have a few more days left in September, but October and September are statistically the worst months of the whole year. And it's putting in one of the most shallow August and September periods. Now, put those two things together. Bitcoin has the most shallow bear market in history, and it's now putting in one of the most shallow August and September periods in its history. It goes to prove and show that your narratives don't mean anything when it comes to Bitcoin, that your theories don't mean anything when it comes to Bitcoin, that the only thing that we really have that is the most reliable thing is Bitcoin itself, its own history. Bitcoin is math, Bitcoin is code, Bitcoin is transparent, Bitcoin is clear, Bitcoin is in your face, Bitcoin is unchangeable. Bitcoin doesn't care about anything except what it is and what it promised from day one. It doesn't deviate. And I am finding increasingly more that people just can't seem to understand that you can't fit Bitcoin inside of your traditional models. It is too different. It's a different species. It's a different item. We've never known an asset like this. And so not being able to apply anything from the past to it, all we can do is look at its own past. All we can do is look at it alone, not in comparison with anything else, not within the confines of something else. And we have to get to this place where we finally just, throw our hands up and say, no narrative or no model works with this thing. It's breaking everybody's model. It's breaking everybody's theories. The theories or the models that you see me propagate are just those that I see within Bitcoin itself. So when I look at this calendar and I see October, November, December are green after 2 red months, I'm going to make you aware of the fact that we need to have a bias on Bitcoin's bias. We need to base our bias on Bitcoin's history, not anybody else's talk or narrative or macroeconomic view. That means nothing to Bitcoin. All right, so Bitcoin's telling us October, November, and December is statistically more bullish than August and September. So get ready. That's period number 1. Now, let's go back to period, if we can. I want to go back to period number 2. The most important period coming up is October, November, December. The second period is the period 6 to 8 months after the halving. Now go back to the Bitcoin spiral clock. Look at it now for me. Pull it up right now for me. I want you to realize something here. I want you to go to the 12 o'clock mark, which is the Bitcoin halving. First, I want you to note that every single cycle, Bitcoin adds a 0 to its US dollar denominated value. Now take a look at the circles along the 12 o'clock mark. Notice that it adds a 0 from 10. Look at from 10. Follow the yellow circle from 10 and watch it go from 10 to 100. You see it go from 10 to 100. It circles. It even goes sometimes 2 zeros in one cycle. So it went from 10. Look at the middle. Look at the first. The middle of the spiral is this yellow square. Now go up the 12 o'clock line to the first number, 10. From that 10, follow the yellow line. Look how it shoots past 100. It achieved a 0. A little bit later, past 3 o'clock, it briefly went past 1,000. But the point is that every cycle, it at least achieves 1 0, and it adds 1 0 to its value, and it goes past that 1 0. So from 10, it achieved another 0 at 100, and it went past 100 to even go slightly past 1,000. Okay, now come all the way back from 100. We circle again, and it achieves 1,000 and goes past 1,000. Does it go past 1,000 here? It goes past, let's see. I wish you could see my cursor here, but I know you can't. So we achieve 100. 100 achieves 1,000 and goes past it. 1,000 achieves 10,000. Now follow the 10,000, guys. Follow the 10,000 and see the 10,000 gets past and goes all the way to 69,000, okay, around 430. So the 430 mark was 69,000, more or less. Okay. The 3 o'clock mark, I'm talking about the last completed circle. So the 3 o'clock mark was 64,000, if you'll recall, and the 430 mark was 69,000. Okay. And so the last cycle was to achieve 10,000. And we went way past 10,000 to 69,000. This cycle, which we see a little past 930 on the spiral, well, this cycle is to achieve, if history's any guide, 100,000. But remember, Bitcoin historically goes way past the zero that it's supposed to achieve every cycle. And sometimes it achieves 2 of those zeros. So can you imagine if we achieve the 100,000, all right, at or shortly after the halving, and by the peak of the market, you go way past that to almost broach the next zero at 1,000,000. Now, I'm not making a price prediction here, all right? I've learned to try to stay away from those things. That's just hocus pocus stuff. But I do believe that coming up with a broad, and it should be broad, a broad price range based on what has happened historically and in a repetitive way, a cyclical way, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And especially if it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen, because as far as I'm concerned, if this next zero isn't achieved, it doesn't really matter to me. That does not dictate my view of Bitcoin's value. I am not in this to acquire more fiat. I'm in this to acquire more Bitcoin. And the lower Bitcoin remains and the longer it remains low, helps me achieve my goal of more Bitcoin, which is my number one goal, more. I am not looking for more fiat. I am looking for more Bitcoin. So a rising Bitcoin price does not do anything great for my goal. Now, I know that may sound hypocritical to some, but it's absolutely true. It is absolutely true when it comes to my desire. Now, I know many of you want the value to go up, but I'm not where I want to be in terms of accumulation. So I'm not concerned if Bitcoin doesn't go up. I am just telling you that I don't see that as a great likelihood. The likelihood I see is Bitcoin achieving $100,000 based on every single cycle it's had in the past. It adds a zero. There's a possibility that it could achieve 2 zeros, which means that it could poke past 1,000,000. All right. Maybe you determine what the odds are of that, but almost every single time Bitcoin has either achieved 2 zeros or come very close to achieving the second zero. It doesn't just achieve the first zero. Historically, it greatly surpasses that zero. And all you have to do is just look at this spiral. Now, this brings me to the second most important period that I wanted to make you aware of. And that's not necessarily the halving. That's not the period. The period I want you to be aware of is 1:30. On the clock, 1:30. The time we have after the halving, we have about, I would say it's April. We have about 5 months. You've got about, let's call it 6 months. We will have 6 months after the halving, if history's any guide. We will have only 6 months before epic blast off in the US dollar denominated price of Bitcoin. Just look at 130. I am not pontificating. I am not coming up with an imagined scenario. All I'm doing is looking at what has happened every freaking time 6 months or so after Bitcoin's halving at the 130 mark. Look at the yellow line accelerate. Look at the price accelerate. So look at how from the halving, with the exception of the first one, but from the halving, you still stay pretty calm. So at 12:30, you're still calm. At 1 o'clock, you're still calm. And around 1:30, which, if you want to know what 1:30 is, it's just before the US presidential election. I don't know if Satoshi somehow did this on purpose, but the halving is about 6 months or so before every presidential election, 6, 7 months before every presidential election. And the blast off is just before the presidential election. So that during the presidential election, Bitcoin's rocking almost every single 4-year cycle. And so you come across that 130 mark and the acceleration really begins. So if you think about this, we still have 1 full year before true blast off. If you think about it, because I'm talking about 6 months or so after April of next year, that's the true blast off. And that gives us just a little bit north of a year. But this doesn't mean that we really totally have a year, because, as I mentioned, everything starts next month. So the start of this grand movement into the presidential election blast off, the start of it is just a stone's throw away. It starts the October, the November, the December before the halving. It starts there. That's period 1. Period 2 is after the halving all the way to the presidential election. That's period 2. We've got 2 periods here, guys. The period starting October, basically to December. Then we've got the period from the halving in April to the presidential election. And then true epic blast off, if history's any guide, begins. Now, notice that at 4:30 on the clock, that typically cyclically is when you top out. All right. And at 7:30 is typically when you bottom out. All right. And despite whatever's been going on in the world, despite what the Federal Reserve's been doing, despite what the money supply was, despite what the interest rate levels were, despite what the economy was going through, despite what the regulators were saying, despite who was banning Bitcoin, it doesn't seem to change this. It doesn't seem to change the fact that 6 months or so after the halving, you have blast off. It doesn't change the fact that at 4:30 or so, you've got the top. It doesn't change the fact that no matter what's going on in the world, at 7:30, you bottom out. You understand? And these things have happened every single time. And I get a lot of traders that ask me, Oliver, why do you think it's so consistent this way? And the only way I can think of is that it's based on code. It's based on math. Code is the modern day version of written in stone. We used to say that all the time. It's written in stone. Well, it's written in code. It's transparent. It's open for the world. And This is the only thing I can think of as to why it's so freaking consistent. And so, guys, my message to you is that all narratives out there, oh, Bitcoin's not going to go up anymore because of the futures market. BS, nonsense. Oh, well, Bitcoin's never gone through a recession. Next year, 2024 is going to bring about a recession. So that's going to change everything. BS. All these narratives should be ignored because what you see here is factual, in your face, statistical consistency. And I would rather bet on statistical consistency, history that's happened repetitively, than some fanciful idea that's never happened. All right. I'm not going to bet on what's never happened over what's happened over and over and over again. All right. And the other things that I shared with you guys were, I shared the fact that I shared a few charts here, and I'll just briefly talk about them here and then see if anybody has any questions, which virtually no one except Calvin basically has questions, but we'll see this time. I posted the 1-year hodl chart, where I want you to take a look at this chart, guys. Go grab that 1-year hodl chart. All right, go grab it. I don't know if I should post it here for you. Maybe I can post it here for you as well. But go grab that chart if you can. And I can post it for you if you like. Do I have it here? Yeah, here it is. Boom. This 1-year hodl chart is showing, the green line shows the price, the US dollar price. The red line in the chart shows the 1-year hodl rate. So what it's showing you, whoa, I'm not connected. Why is it saying to reconnect? Okay. So guys, I posted the 1-year hodl rate here. The green line is showing the US dollar price, and the red line is showing the 1-year hodl rate. So basically, we're just shy of 70% of the entire network. 70% of all Bitcoin in existence hasn't moved in an entire year, guys. Think about this. It's at all-time new highs. Look at the peaks. It's literally at all-time new highs. And the rate of rise during this most recent bump to the upside, this most recent move to all-time new highs is very impressive. Now, I believe that this is a phenomenon that will likely continue, that each cycle, for the most part, we will move to a new 1-year, a new all-time high based on the 1-year hodl rate. And we basically add another zero again. So, the last cycle, look at 2020, we achieved 60%. You see that? You see the little bump above 60% in between 20 and 21? Well, now this cycle, we've achieved 70%. All right. The next cycle, we might achieve 80%. There is no asset like this. This is the whole point. Guys, we've just gone through a bear market in which Bitcoin experienced a 78% decline from its all-time new high. 78%. And yet 70% said, I don't care. 70% of all Bitcoin said, I don't care. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not letting go of this. I know what I have. I'm not giving you the ability to take it from me. Despite the fact that the asset dropped 78% from its all-time new high, 70% of all Bitcoin said, I don't care. Like, what other asset in the world would experience that? Guys, Apple is the most valuable asset on planet Earth. And if it had a 78% decline, someone would say, my God, Apple is finished. Apple is broken. Something is wrong. It's the most valuable asset in the world outside of gold. And Apple would not have a 70% hodl rate if it fell 78% in a year. I guarantee it. There is nothing like this. This is insane. Okay. Now let's go to the next chart that I posted. All right. Let's go to the next chart that I posted. And maybe I can post it again for you here. Can I do that? Oh, it tells me just to reconnect. Well, guys, you can find this. I have the 90-day hodl rate. That is at an all-time new high. So guys, we're at all-time new highs with the 1-year hodl rate. We're at all-time new highs with the 90-day hodl rate. 88% of all Bitcoin hasn't moved in 90 days. 90 days. When Bitcoin fell from near $31,000 USD per coin down to slightly below 25, 88% of the people say, 88% of all Bitcoin say, I don't care. 88%, 88. That's insane numbers. 88% of all Bitcoin say, I don't care. I'm not moving. I don't care that it fell from 31 to 24 and change. I don't care. I'm not letting this go. I'm not giving it up. I'm not letting you take it from me. That's insane. Okay. Now we go to the look at the all-time high holders of 1 Bitcoin, guys. Go to the next one. One-time holders, Bitcoin number of addresses holding 1 Bitcoin or more. We're at an all-time new high. Someone increasing numbers around the world are starting to realize this is different, that it doesn't matter that it goes through these pullbacks. This is different. It doesn't matter that it has 78% pullbacks. This is different. That it doesn't matter what the economy is going through. This is different. An increasing number of people, organizations, institutions, countries around the world, I'm telling you, all of them, increasing numbers realizing you accumulate and hold this. You don't trade it. You don't swap the strong for the weak. It's here in the data. You wouldn't be at all-time new highs like this. Look at this chart. All of you would love to own something that went up straight like that. Look at it. All the way back from 2010, it's at all-time new highs. Crazy. Look at the all-time new high holders of 0.1 Bitcoin. All-time new highs. Even the babies are getting in on this. They own 1/10 or more of a single Bitcoin. They're even understanding. Growing numbers of people all over the world are starting to realize that I don't care what's happening in the world. I don't care what the politicians say. I don't care what fraud exists in the shitcoin market. I don't care what the Fed is saying. I don't care where interest rates are. I don't care what the inflation rate is. I don't care that it has 78% pullbacks. I'm holding this. I want this. There's no asset like this, guys. Go to the next one. Look at the all-time high of Bitcoin last active in 10 years or longer. Look at that chart. Guys, that looks like the US M2 money supply, or better yet, that looks like a chart of the US debt having reached now $33 trillion, an unpayable sum. This is crazy. And I believe it's just getting started. I've constantly told you, I believe we get to a place, we get to a day where the selling of this asset is a rare event. in sizable numbers. I'm not talking about the dust that goes back between each other, you know, a cup of coffee here, buying a little thing here from each other. Yeah, No, I'm talking about in chunks or solid amounts. I just believe that that's that's going to become a rare event. And this is going to become, and already practically is, the most hodled asset on planet Earth. And it should be the most hodled asset on planet Earth because it is going to be the rarest, scarcest asset on planet Earth in April of 2024, after it goes through its next halving. It becomes the scarcest asset on planet Earth, becoming 2 times more difficult to mine a single Bitcoin than to mine gold. In April, it passes real estate and gold by a long shot, with its stock to flow ratio approaching 120. Real estate, I believe, has a stock to flow ratio around 100. Gold has a stock to flow ratio around 57 or so, 58. All right, that's neck and neck with Bitcoin now. And Bitcoin's stock to flow mushrooms in April all the way past gold and all the way past real estate to just be shy of 120, if my memory serves me correctly, becoming the scarcest asset on planet Earth. Guys, you don't trade the scarcest asset on Earth. You can't be that low IQ, right? That you don't trade scarcity, that you trade things for scarcity. You trade things to gain things that are scarce. You trade things that aren't scarce to gain things that are scarce. You want that beautiful mansion on the hill overlooking the ocean in Malibu? That's not plentiful. That's scarce. You don't trade that. You don't trade the home that you're living in back and forth. You don't trade the Mona Lisa for a hamburger and a milkshake. We're not at the stage of Bitcoin's growth cycle, of Bitcoin's evolution to even think about trading it. The only thing, in my opinion, and what I'm teaching the people who follow me, the only thing you do here is accumulate. You trade everything else in the world, accumulate. You want to trade stocks to get more Bitcoin. You want to trade bonds to get more Bitcoin. You can trade anything else in the world, but you should be trading to fold your gains into Bitcoin. You should be trading your time with your employer to gain more Bitcoin. People say, well, Oliver, that's ridiculous. But how can that be ridiculous? How can that be ridiculous when you have traded your time for dollars your whole life? You've traded your time, you've traded your skill, you've traded your intelligence, you've traded your energy, you traded your very body to gain what? You've done everything in your life for the US dollar, and that US dollar is failing you. So to switch that and to trade every single thing else, to trade everything for something that's not failing you, to trade everything else, to trade everything for the thing that's not being debased on you, that has never broken its promise, that has always done what it said it was going to do, that is not in the hands of any man, not manipulated by any man, not controlled by any man, that is open and transparent for every single human being in the world and is free and accessible to every human being in the world, but cannot be manipulated, controlled, or debased by any human being on planet Earth. Why not trade everything for that? My Venezuelan followers can teach many of my other followers a thing or two about this topic, because I made a post last night asking my Venezuelan followers, would you If you ever got US dollars, would you ever trade your US dollars to go back into the Bolivar? And go look at the responses. It was almost like, Oliver, why are you asking me such a dumb question? Are you serious? Not in this life, not in any life would I do that. And that's the same thing as the US dollar. The Venezuelan Bolivar is the same movie as the US dollar. It's just 32 times faster. That's all. You're watching the same movie. The movie called the US dollar is the same movie called the Argentinian peso, is the same movie called the Venezuelan bolivar, is the same movie called the Turkish lira, is the same movie called the Zimbabwe naira, is the same, it's the same movie. It's just that you're watching the movie at different speeds. The slowest speed is the US dollar. I get it, but it's still the same movie. And so I am of the mindset that you don't trade this. You trade everything else. You want to trade stocks? Go ahead. Options, bonds, futures, currencies. Knock yourself out. You want to trade your mother-in-law? If there was an exchange where you could trade your mother-in-law back and forth, trade your mother-in-law. But trading Bitcoin, I think, is a sign of two things. I think of one of two things. All right. You either have zero understanding of what this asset is, its level of scarcity, and how it is disappearing, and how our time for maximum accumulation is disappearing on us. That's what this talk is about. Our time is limited, right? So you either don't understand that, all right? Or you understand all of that, but your level of intelligence is still so low that it can't register. So it's either one or two of those things. It's honest ignorance. No, I never looked at Bitcoin like this. I really don't know what it is. That's acceptable. But if you do know all of these things and you still think you should trade it, then that's just a sign that you don't have the intellectual capacity to grasp the meaning of it, to grasp that no one sells, large swaths of Manhattan real estate. No one sells the Mona Lisa. You understand? Or at least not frequently. They're not going back and forth and in and out of those things. That's ridiculous. Other things, yes. And I'll finish up on this last topic here. People seem not to understand how it's possible to hold on to something and it be of value. And I'm always thrown a little bit by this lack of understanding, because the people who ask me this have to be aware of the fact that there are families that own swaths of real estate, land that has been in their families from generation to generation. They have to be aware of the fact that there are families that are wealthy and do not ever have to work. Their kids don't ever have to work. Their kids will never have to work. Their kids will never have to work, because great, 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 great granddaddy grabbed some property that is considered to be priceless today, has never let it go, and the family's still living off of what great, 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 great granddaddy did. That how else do you build a legacy if you don't accumulate something that can be passed down? And so I think that the misunderstanding regarding that comes from, I think the confusion regarding that comes from a misunderstanding that Bitcoin is property, and that the term cryptocurrency gets in the way. But it is the apex property. It is the most premium property. In April, it becomes the scarcest property on earth. And you don't get rid of the scarcest property on earth, because you'll never get it back unless you pay astronomically more for it. So there's this fundamental misunderstanding, this fundamental lack of understanding of the value of scarcity. And I get it, because almost nothing that we've ever been exposed to is scarce. Almost nothing that is global, that is accessible, is scarce. What we've had historically is man-made scarcity. That's what we've had. So for instance, the number of people on planet Earth that has access to Apple shares is small, making Apple shares scarce. But Apple has 16 billion shares outstanding. So in that sense, Apple shares are not scarce. And on top of that, there is a possibility that Apple could print more shares. It's not against the law for them to do it. So they do have the capacity to do that. So Apple's 16 billion shares outstanding can become more than 16 billion shares, but it is still man-made. It's still scarce because of man-made's limitations on who can access Apple shares. And so it is made to be scarce, but it is not scarce. Bitcoin is scarce intrinsically. 16 billion Apple shares, 21 million, slightly less than 21 million Bitcoin. There's no comparison. And you can't possibly make more. And yes, Bitcoin is becoming scarcer by the day through dust, all right, through the Bitcoin dust effect. All right, look that up if you want to. It's becoming more scarce through lost coins every single day, unfortunately. But yes, well, fortunately for some, unfortunately for others. So not only is Bitcoin intrinsically scarce, it is becoming more scarce. And the fact that, look at all these charts, guys, people holding it for 10 years and not letting it go, people holding it for 12 months and not letting it go, people holding it for 2 years and not letting it go, people holding it for 6 months not letting it go, 3 months not letting it go, 90 days not letting it go, 30 days. I heard a number that the 30-day hodl rate reached over 95%. So whether you get this or not, there's a growing number of people in the world who are starting to get this. Otherwise, you could not have hodl rates this high. So anyway, guys, my main points here I wanted to drill home was the 2 periods, right? So let's not forget those. I'll quickly summarize them, and then I'll go to any questions if there are any. But remember, the 2 periods, October, November, December, that's coming up now. That historical period kicks off the massive period that leads in. That's the first period that leads into the halving, right? After the halving, we've got another secondary period, right? That period from the halving to just before the US presidential election, that's when Bitcoin goes into overdrive, statistically, historically, to the upside. So I look at these as 2 periods. We've got this pocket right now, starting right now in October before the halving. And we've got this pocket right after the halving, all right, up until the US presidential election. And then let the frickin' games begin. Why am I constantly saying our time is running out? Because these, every single day, every single week, every single hour, this window, these 2 windows are shrinking. And are you doing enough to take advantage of what history says is coming? Not what anybody else says is coming, but what Bitcoin's history is telling you it's coming. Bitcoin is the most reliable, trustworthy thing that has ever been accessible to human beings. You trust that over anything and anyone. I hope you understand that. That's what you trust. The Bitcoin history is what we trust. It has never failed us. It's never been down over the last 10 years. It's never had a hiccup. It's never faltered. It's never broken a promise. It's never stopped doing what it said it was here to do. Never. And so when it comes to another narrative, don't believe that. Believe Bitcoin's narrative, Bitcoin's history. When it comes to someone's notion about, oh, Bitcoin's not going to go up anymore because of this and that, don't believe that. Believe Bitcoin's history. That's the most reliable thing we have. All right, guys, I'll take your questions. You guys don't ask questions, though, so I don't have to worry about that. I know. Let's see here. Does anybody have any questions? I'm wondering if I can look at this on my computer here. I'm sitting in front of my computer. But let's see here. I'll try to look at it both ways here. What do we have here? All right, Calvin says, I knew it was Calvin. All right. All right, Mike is asking, Calvin, I'll get to you in a minute here. Mike is asking, can you comment on how to interpret open interest? Does low open interest now mean lack of bets either direction? Well, low volume means yes. There's a lack of, well, there's a lack of liquidity, not a lack of liquidity, but there's just low activity. And guys, I don't want you to think that low activity, low volumes and low activity are bad things. Those are cleansing things. And I know I'm not speaking to a lot of professional market participants, so I have to, I'm perfectly willing to break some of these things down in at least a cursory way. But these low volume activity is the state that you always want to happen after a bear market. So what typically happens after a bear market is you bottom, all right? The bear market has crushed, right? The majority of people, the weak hands that could not hold on. There are a few that are your dear lifer hold oners. They hold on. They're still hurt. They're still not the strongest of hands, but they've held on. And that last group gets completely washed out during the basing period after a bottom. So that period, that elongated period that happens after a market bottoms is the final cleansing out of all that needs to be eliminated, all that needs to be purified, all that needs to be eradicated. The market heals itself not through the drop. The drop does not heal a market. It's the sideways movement after the drop that is the healing part. And let me tell you this, statistically, the longer the healing part, the longer the choppy sideways, no directional market, the longer that period, the cleaner your market becomes, the purer your market becomes. And it eliminates everyone who should not deserve and does not deserve to be there. What that period also does is bring into itself brand new owners of the asset that have a different mindset, a different psychology, because they've come into the marketplace during this cleansing period. They are the least susceptible to sell. So then the market becomes purely, the market gets rid of all excess. It gets rid of all the people looking for quick gains. It gets rid of all the speculators. It gets rid of all the moon people who are just looking for fiat in a short way. It gets rid of all the people that want riches overnight. It kills them. The sideways movement is a bigger killer than the downward movement. And during this period, when you see the volume get lower and lower, the interest get lower and lower, the futures markets volume gets lower, the trading volume on exchanges gets lower, the transactional volume on the whole network gets lower, that's a positive indication that we're almost totally cleansed out. We're almost there. You want to see that. That is not negative. Now, think of it this way. Think of it like you have a sponge that is saturated, heavy, saturated with water. And as you squeeze the sponge, you're squeezing water out of the sponge, and the water is getting purified from the dirty water on the sponge. You cleaned something with the sponge, it's full of water. Now you're going to squeeze that dirty water out of the sponge. Now, as you squeeze the drops in the beginning, when you start squeezing, it's a gush out of the sponge. That gush becomes less of a gush, becomes heavy drip. Then from a heavy drip, it starts becoming a medium drip, then a very light drip. And you squeeze it one more time, and you're barely getting drops out of the sponge. You want that period to come. You don't want the sponge to stay saturated. You don't want the water flow, the volume flow to stay high. You want to see that sponge get almost empty. And then once a sponge is empty, once a sponge has gotten rid of all its water, the only possible next state for the sponge is to get saturated again. And so the very best time to get involved is now. The very best time to get involved is when the volume's low, not when it's high, when it's low. The very best time to get aggressive is when the drips are infrequent, when the flow is at a low, when the futures activity is at a low, when the volume on exchanges is at a low. Now, in my field, this is basics 101. But it's always good to be reminded of these things. It's the best period, guys, the best period right now. All right. All right, what else here, guys? Let's see what else here. Let's see what else here. What else you got here? Calvin asked a very good question here. I know he said I can skip his things because, guys, Calvin is like part of my family, so he gets my responses all the time. But how does adoption of Bitcoin currently under 1% play into the circle data? It's very powerful because, guys, if Bitcoin has become the best performing asset in the history of the world, if Bitcoin has achieved the world's record for the best monthly gain ever, the best quarterly gain ever, the best yearly gain ever, the best 3-year gain ever, the best 5-year gain ever, the best 10-year gain ever, and of course the best 14-year ever. If it's gained all of this with only not 1% is way big, 0.03% of the world having adopted, then where are we going to be when 1% of the world adopts it? We're 0.03% of the entire world's population owns Bitcoin. That's crazy. Where are we going to be at 0.5%? Where are we going to be at 1%, 10%, 20, 40, 60? I am telling you that 0.003% at world global adoption, that number is not going down. It's only going up. So I don't care what narratives you hear about Bitcoin, Bitcoin can be manipulated to never go up. That's BS. That's like, I don't even want to get on that. How idiotic that is. All right. You can there are certain things that reveal a person's inexperience in financial markets. And that's one of them. All right. Failing to understand that every play is both sides. That every play is both sides. You know, you can't say that a short can be successful forever. I don't even want to get on that. Just no matter what the narrative is, guys, it's simple math. All right. 0.03% adoption. That number has produced the best performing asset in the world. That number is not going down. It is only going up. Look at everyone hodling. Look at the supply getting cut in half. Look at the institutions coming at some point, whether it's 2023, 2024, 2025 spot ETF coming. The world, the institutional world is coming. The trillions are coming to this asset. A growing number of people are understanding that you don't sell it no matter how far it goes down. Guys, it's as clear as the night follows the day. It's in your freaking face. And the history of Bitcoin has pretty much played out tit for tat every single cycle. And every single cycle, here we are again during that really painful sideways, low volume period I spoke about, that you get all these crazy theories that start popping out, typically from the people who got wrecked or destroyed during the last cycle. Right? They've lost faith, they got wrecked, they got destroyed, and now they're just pontificating and creating theories to support their wreckage. I saw it last cycle. I saw all the reasons why we're trading at 4,000 or 5,000. I saw all the reasons why we're going to 1,000. Crazy. All right. All right. Some say, obviously, some say, Peter Zian, that Fed now and the future of CBDC in the US will render all cryptos and Bitcoin obsolete because Fed now and CBDC will be instant and free, and you can compete with instant and free. What would you say to him? I would say that there are certain comments and certain statements that fall into the category of stupid. And there are certain comments and statements that go way beyond the category of stupid into the realm of absolute dumb. And I would say that this belief, this narrative, that theory that a Fed now or a CBDC is actually going to make Bitcoin an open network, a closed network is going to make an open network go to zero. That is beyond dumb. Let me just answer it by saying this, that not only will a CBDC in the FedNow system not make Bitcoin obsolete, it's going to make Bitcoin adoption explode. If you thought that the debasement of your value, the erosion of your time, your worth, and the money that you save, if you thought that that was terrible, wait until it's 100% digital. Wait until you think you already realize you don't have control over your money. Just wait until it's all digital and watch the little tiny control you have completely disappear. CBDCs are only going to make it easier for people to adopt Bitcoin. CBDCs and FedNow are only going to accentuate the knowledge and understanding of how Bitcoin delivers freedom and this is slavery. It is actually going to be one of the biggest neo signs, one of the biggest advertisements for freedom that the world has ever seen before. If you think that Bitcoin's performance has been impressive up till now as the best performing asset on planet Earth. Just wait until a CBDC in our country, which I don't think is going to happen. But if that were to happen, I believe that you're going to see an adoption rate like we could never possibly imagine of Bitcoin. That I believe it's the opposite. I believe that you're teaching the world about digital assets. You're teaching the world about the value of having something that is not physical. You're teaching the world about wallets, and you think that that is going to hurt Bitcoin? Dude, you're rolling out the red carpet for Bitcoin. What the heck are you talking about? One of the biggest obstacles I have to overcome with the majority of people with money when it comes to me trying to orange pill them is that it's not physical. And a CBDC comes along to teach the world that no, money is not physical anymore. And that's going to hurt Bitcoin. Like I said, there are certain comments and statements that fall into the category of stupid. And then there are others that go beyond that and fall into the category of absolutely being dumb. And that's one of them. Crazy. I plan on refinancing my Bitcoin into perpetuity so as to not have to sell any of it like prime real estate. Do you think the refinancing options for Bitcoin will eventually develop because currently the borrowing rates are too high? Yes, 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 yes. I want you to think about the internet and how I don't know for if many of you were alive or adults at this particular time or were even paying attention at this particular time, but when the internet first came out, the services on top of it, the capabilities on top of that network, that open protocol were very limited. I mean, most people just thought it was useful for chat, and then it moved to be useful for sharing files, and then it moved to being useful for music, and then voice over IP came and dot 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 dot. But the use cases, the utility, and the services built on top of it are still growing on top of the open protocol we call IP, TCP. And so, of course, Bitcoin's a baby. It's 14 years into its existence. All of those services are coming to Bitcoin. They exist now, but they're coming to Bitcoin in a prolific way. Why is it that every single bank in America is getting rights to custody Bitcoin? Why? Why is that? Every single bank in America will ultimately have rights to custody Bitcoin. Why do you think that is? So the services are coming, guys. The red carpet will be rolled out to Bitcoin holders. Why? Because it is not like other assets that have traditionally been used as collateral, like land, because the person holding land as collateral to give you a loan, if you default, they got to deal with land now. And then I was like, I don't want to. They're not in the real estate business. They're in the lending money business, right? They don't want to get stuck with your land and have to sell that at fireside prices. They don't want to go into that business. People have put up businesses as collateral. They don't want your business if you default, but they've had to accept these forms of collateral. You understand? But now you take a piece of collateral that is global, that is desirable all over the world, that trades 24 hours a day, that is one of the most liquid markets in the world, that is the only market that is truly 24 hours right now. And it becomes the most pristine collateral on planet Earth. Because if you renege on your loan, they get their money back instantly. in the bat of an eye, 24 hours a day, 365, they have zero exposure, and that there's no third party risk. Like the building that you put up for collateral gets bombed. Now where's the collateral? And then you renege on the loan. Or the piece of property you put up for collateral is now entrenched in a major lawsuit, tied up, and you renege on the loan. Like none of that third part, none of that exists with this pristine collateral. So I believe that those that have Bitcoin in any degree of size will be able to get anything on planet Earth they want without an approval process, without anything. If you have Bitcoin, what do I need to approve? If you've got Bitcoin, I don't care how much you make. I don't care if you're employed. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your neighborhood is. I don't care what your educational background is. Dude, you have Bitcoin? Well, come this way. And I believe that the future of finance is over collateralized Bitcoin. That's it. Over collateralized Bitcoin. You'll be able to get anything on planet Earth your heart desires without ever having to sell your Bitcoin. You want that yacht? You want that mansion on the hill? You want that trip around the world? You want that Ferrari zooming down the street right now? You can get it if you've got Bitcoin without ever selling it. And get this, I believe that the loans against Bitcoin are coming where you don't even have to pay back the loan. How's that? Think of a loan that you got for something you desire that you don't have to pay back. You just have to pay back the interest, but you don't have to pay back the principal. And so, but you have to over collateralize the loan, right? So let's say Bitcoin next cycle goes up 5x. Now, the collateral you need to back up that loan, a big portion of it can be released back to you. So the Bitcoin you had locked up, now you need less locked up. And you just keep paying the interest. The next cycle, it goes up by a factor of 5 or 6, whatever. Now, the next cycle, the collateral that's backing up that loan, you need less. So you pull your Bitcoin back to yourself, and you keep pulling back your Bitcoin that you had in collateral as collateral. You keep pulling it back, paying the interest, but every cycle it gets less and less and less and less until the amount of Bitcoin backing that loan is dust. That's crazy. I believe that's coming. I believe that all major finance in the future is going to be based on Bitcoin as the most pristine collateral. I know we shouldn't focus too much on this, Jose saying, but what's your thoughts about a time frame for spot ETF approval from a probability perspective? This is hard to determine, but let me give you my ideas. These are just my ideas, so I am prefacing this with that, guys. Just my thoughts, my opinion, my ideas. I believe it is most bullish if a spot ETF does not occur anytime soon. And let me explain to you why. Bitcoin doesn't need help from a spot ETF, especially right now. Okay. We've got this bullish period, October, November, December coming up. We've got the halving coming up in April. We've got that period right before blast off, before the presidential election. We don't need anybody's help. Bitcoin doesn't need the SEC's help. Bitcoin doesn't need a spot ETF's help. It's got its own mechanics, its own monetary system, its own history, its own cyclical, repetitive things it does over and over and over again. Where it could help is in 2025. Around, if you go back to that spiral clock, around that 430 mark where Bitcoin cyclically tops out. Now, what if that's around a year or so again after blastoff? So let's say late 2025. Let's say a spot ETF gets approved in mid to late 2025. When Bitcoin cyclically tops out, what if a spot ETF at that time thwarts a top out, hyperextends a bull move, eliminates a bear market, changes the cyclical nature of Bitcoin, removing bear markets forever? Maybe, just maybe, creating what is the new second phase of Bitcoin, which I'll term hyper cycles. To me, that's the most bullish scenario. Whether we get it or not is a different story. But we don't need one now. But we could use one in 2025. The longer a spot Bitcoin ETF is held off, the greater the demand for it will be when it is finally launched. And we all know that it's coming. The only question is when. I say hold it off. I say let it build up. I say let it help extend the bull. I say let it come when Bitcoin is supposed to top so that we get some extra pump out of this thing. Ha ha! Yeah, that's my take. And I'm sticking with it. All right. Young gentlemen, great content, Brooklyn. You know, and some of us know you know. Thanks. I appreciate that. Oliver, don't you think that if the SEC will try to revoke BTC futures, they will be exposed to serious lawsuits? Not really. To be honest with you, I can't say with all confidence. I can't answer this with all confidence because I'm not really qualified to. I don't know the history of the SEC revoking a decision like this in the past. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. So I'm not sure about this. But I will say that any revoking of a spot, I mean, any revoking of a futures-based ETF will probably pump Bitcoin's USD value price pretty hard. Right? So it's a positive catalyst in my view. You see, because futures-based ETFs they are not required to own the asset itself. They own the paper version of the asset. And so the removal of some of the biggest paper players in the market will create a greater demand for the actual item itself. And I believe that would be a positive catalyst for the USD-based price of Bitcoin. Is longing Bitcoin with low leverage and enough capital to cover the drawdowns with the intention of holding the trade long term okay, then converting the profits into Bitcoin in the end? I'm almost reluctant to answer this question. It is a good question because almost invariably people take these things way further than they should. But I would say that if you are talented and skilled, as many of my traders are, if you're skilled at probability analysis, then the answer is yes. It is viable. So let's say, for instance, you say that from a probability standpoint, Bitcoin dropping below 8,000 is this number. So let's say you say it has a very, very low probability of dropping below 8,000. So in this cycle, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage my existing Bitcoin for more Bitcoin with a liquidation point of 5,000 or 6,000, something under that 8,000 number, right? And that's, but that's knowing the probability of that happening being low. So you can comfortably do a loan with your liquidation point below 8,000. Now, if you set aside the amount to be, for instance, you take out a loan that has a liquidation, you can go beyond that if you have the capital to actually handle a liquidation higher, and you put that aside, and that can be okay as well. All right. But you should do it based on a probability analysis, right? When you're doing these low leverage loan amounts. Okay. And I would say that you want to stay statistically, you want to give Bitcoin an 85% drawdown from your loan point, right? So wherever Bitcoin is trading, calculate an 85% drop from that price right there. So you're taking out a loan at 25,000. What's an 85% drop from 85,000? Now you want your liquidation point to just be a little south of that number. And from a probability standpoint, you're okay. All right. So use that as a general guideline. I'm not giving you advice. I'm just saying that you need to be skillful with these types of models like that. What are my Jeremy, what are my thoughts on Saylor wanting to standardize Bitcoin like Rockefeller standardized oil? I think this is super bullish, and the energy aspect of Bitcoin is the most bullish. Please retweet below for more clarification. I'll have to look into that a little bit, Jeremy. I don't want to speak off the top of my head in a contemporaneous way without looking into it. All right. But I will take a look into it. I appreciate you providing those links. However, why you don't recommend to move every buy in the exchange to the cold storage only when you have a good amount of Bitcoin? Okay, I think that's a great question from Melgad 28. I have I teach my traders and those Bitcoiners close to me. I teach them what's called UTXO management, right? And what a UTXO is literally like little pieces of Bitcoin, right? So you can look at a UTXO, which is an unspent transaction. You can look at a UTXO as the individual bills in your wallet. So you have $100 bill, a $20 bill, a $50 bill. You got some singles, you got a $5 bill. And so UTXOs are the bills, the individual bills in your wallet. They're pieces of Bitcoin. Now, there is a threshold called the dust threshold in Bitcoin. and it's a moving target. But think of the dust threshold as being the level at which the cost to move that Bitcoin is actually higher than what the Bitcoin is worth. So if you have a UTXO that is so small that it falls below the dust threshold, that's loss forever. You can literally lose Bitcoin forever that you're saving if the UTXO is too small to move it. All right. So one of the ways you can basically guarantee that this is not going to happen to you is to accumulate 1 million sats first before you think about moving it to your wallet, right? You're accumulating on an exchange. Make sure at least before you think about moving it, it's 1 million sats or more. All right. But you want to be careful about these dusts on the main chain. Now, of course, if you move Bitcoin to a Lightning wallet or so, then you don't have an issue with this dust factor, but you do have that on the main chain. And so these little tiny micro buys, you got to be careful with those because you can run into this dust problem. There is, for those of you who really, if you want to do a little deeper dive into that, I believe that Unchained Capital has, let me see if I can post that link here for you. Unchained Capital has a great article on it. I do want to say this before I go. By no means do I consider myself a Bitcoin expert, guys. I consider myself a baby. I am learning in real time in front of you. I consider we being on this journey together, walking side by side. Nobody really is ahead of each other. We're just, taking our experience and using that experience and projecting it as best we can on this brand new asset called Bitcoin and trying to extrapolate what it means for us and our lives and our futures and things of that nature. But I am by no means an expert. All I can share with you is my 40 plus years of experience in the financial markets and how that has helped me in some ways see this asset for myself. All I can do is share. So you take that for what it's worth. My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time. Boom!